and in the awareness of God's presence here and now. Father, Mother God, we give thanks. We open ourselves to the receiving of your love, and we give thanks. We open ourselves to the awareness of the miracles that are all around us, and we give thanks. We allow ourselves to be the expression of your love here in this moment, in every moment, and we give thanks. And in our activity and consciousness, we hold the world. We hold every being occupying this planet. We hold the universe in this embrace of love that you offer us. And we give thanks. For this opportunity to practice presence, for this opportunity to be in gratitude. We give thanks. And for this, together we say, Amen. Well, what is mine to do? As you know, or most of you know, a week before last, I was back at Unity Village at conference, the annual convention. We have the convention in Overland Park, Kansas. I usually stay at Unity Village because I like the rejuvenation, the energy that comes from that place. And so we had 4 days of gathering together. We had workshops. We had guest speakers, of course. We had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to engage my role as marketing director for Unity Worldwide Ministries, and we had a very great reception to the announcement of the online school, Unity Worldwide Spiritual Institute. So that's going to be coming up and available for each and every one of us to participate in coming this fall. So we had a wonderful gathering, and somebody in that group was a carrier. I thought, when I came back, I thought that I had food poisoning on my way back because I stopped at a Subway just off the highway in Junction City, Kansas. You may know that if you've traveled that route. And it turns out that what I had on Saturday night, I would not wish on anybody. But it turns out that on Monday night, Linda came down with something. So we determined that it was a 2-day incubation period. I realized that it was Thursday when I got infected. So I went through the list of the people that I hugged or shook hands with. They're on my list. So anyway, while just before I left, Shannon was expecting on the 19th of June, and because she had had 2 cesareans before, she had planned on having a 3rd cesarean. So she was scheduling her cesarean on the 17th, but it turns out that the baby seemed to want to come sooner. So she had her cesarean on the Sunday that I was going to be traveling, so I delayed my departure by a day. So while Randy Ferguson was here, Shannon was in the hospital, and we were all twiddling our thumbs, biting our nails, looking at our wristwatch. How long has it been? So Mackenzie Jane Forsyth was born on Sunday afternoon on the 12th. And so I headed out on Monday morning. So I actually have not been released to hold the baby since I got back. And with good reason, but nonetheless, I think this afternoon the prison door has been opened, and so I'm going to be able to hold Mackenzie. I held her for a few minutes before, after she was born. But in any case, so while that was going on, there was, as you know, a whole bunch of people in Orlando that were mourning the death of their friends, their family members, loved ones. They had, how do you describe that? You know, it's just, oh my God. Well, not being here last week, I felt that I still needed to address that issue that occurred 2 weeks ago. So we look at that situation, and certainly it ranks up high on the list of massacres that have occurred in the U.S. Turns out that Wounded Knee was a greater massacre that occurred in 1890, and those particular terrorists were in blue uniforms. But we look at this situation, whether it's Orlando or it's Columbine or it's there's so many to choose from on that list, right? How is it that that's happening? What is it that's causing that to happen? Is it that there are so many rats in the maze that the rats are now starting to turn on each other? Is that what's happening? I don't think it's a problem of overcrowding. I think it's a problem of consciousness. I think that it's a problem that we as a society have endorsed, given our permission and validation for judging. Now, it's hard to say what was going through the minds of that shooter, but it is certainly easy to understand that one of the driving forces that allowed him to justify in his own mind, regardless of whether it's reasonable or not, regardless of whether it's moral or not, but in his own mind, there was justification that he had the opportunity and the ability, certainly, if not the responsibility, to make a judgment on those people that he decided to kill. Don't we do that all the time? Don't we make decisions on what is appropriate for us to judge? Don't we look at the lifestyle or the behavior or the way a person conducts their life and say, yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. Now, in this political season, I raise my hand to testify that, yes, indeed, I do have that tendency to drop into judgment. I know that. Sometimes there are opportunities for me to delete posts that I make in Facebook. And sometimes I don't take that opportunity. Other times I do. But there is an underlying practice and validation that is given in our society to judge other people. And I know that we don't take it to the extreme that the fellow in Orlando took it. But don't we nonetheless practice this concept of judging others? We have an opportunity to not do that. And sometimes we take that opportunity. Other times we don't. And I suggest to you that one of the underlying causes of situations like that is that we have somehow validated this idea that we are, that we have the permission to judge others. What can we do about that? What can we do about that? It's not that Orlando is anyone's fault here in this room, but I'm suggesting that if we as a society, of which we are a part, if we as a society would adopt the position that it is inappropriate in all cases for us to judge others, then we are not giving permission to someone who is, as apparently the case in the shooter in Orlando, having difficulty with his own identity. Perhaps there was other mental illness issues going on. Perhaps not. I don't know. But it seems to me that our willingness to accept others, our unwillingness to accept the foibles of others is an underlying cause of this issue. And you don't have to accept that. In fact, you never have to accept anything that I say. I offer that to you as an opportunity for you to consider the question and to consider how it is that we look at our neighbors in a negative light and judge them for whatever minor offense they may have undertaken. There are those that say, well, this is just an aspect of Islam. This fellow called up 911 and he pledged his allegiance to ISIS, and it's all ISIS's fault. Well, investigators are coming to the conclusion that that wasn't really the reality. That was just a way for the fellow to justify his actions. Perhaps at the point where he made that phone call, he said, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Then searching in his own mind, "Oh, I'm going to have to find some excuse here to justify in my own mind before I die," which I'm certainly going to be dying, because I'm not going to go through the court system. I'm not going to undertake what society has in store for me. I'll just go out in a blaze of glory. Well, it's not ISIS's fault, although there are other things that ISIS could be blamed for. It's not Islam's fault. A good friend of mine was a practitioner. He's no longer with us, but he was a practitioner of Islam. In fact, in the early days of this ministry, he taught a class that was a comparison of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He was a practicing Sufi, and he was adamant in his position that Islam does not preach that we must kill. In fact, scholars of Islam testify repeatedly, yet there is this thing that we think we need to justify our moral superiority somehow and say that Islam is the fault of this. It's not. So, anyway, I had to get that off my chest. So what do we do about this? What is it that we can do about this? What are your thoughts about that? What can we do about this? I'll have a drink while you consider that question.
Fight for reasonable gun control.
I'm sorry?
Fight for reasonable gun control.
I still didn't hear
You
you.
said fight for reasonable gun control laws.
Fight for reasonable gun control laws. Okay? All right.
Are you asking about what can we do about the Orlando thing, or what we can do about our own judgments of our neighbors?
What can we do about this society that seems to give permission to our practice of judging others?
See the God in all people.
See the God in all people. Okay? Joanne?
There was some gentleman several years back who developed the little snap wristband thing for every time he said something negative, he'd snap the band and put it on the other wrist.
Right? Yep.
Maybe we could do something like that every time we find ourselves judging someone else, and then set the tone with our own personal, if everyone was trying really hard in their own personal space not to be judgmental, that may have a pervasive effect throughout the general conversation.
As far as your last part of that statement, that it may have an effect, I would suggest that it will definitely have an effect. That when we practice that, that reverberates through the web. That reverberates through every relationship that we have. And that affects everyone in those relationships, even if just a little. Even if it's just a little bit of a dent in their practice of judging others. Practicing non-judgment is a spiritual practice. There's no question about that. But it's also a societal, practical remedy, in my mind, for this permission that we give to judge others. In conversations, when we hear someone judge another, how should we respond? We need to be careful not to judge others for judging others, right? But how do we respond to that? What is it that we can do on a regular, habitual basis when we hear someone judging others? Sending love to them, okay?
Don't jump on the bandwagon.
Don't jump on the bandwagon. Don't affirm what they have just said. It's not that we have to be rude, right? It's not that we have to say, boy, that's stupid, or that's not appropriate, but rather to send love to them, to embrace them in love, and to look at another perspective. Use your creative skills to reframe that situation, to look at that situation from a glass half full rather than half empty. I mean, that's a worn out trope, but to allow ourselves to be in a ready consciousness, to reframe that which is causing consternation on the part of others. Maybe it's only within that we reframe it. Maybe we don't decide to state the reframing. Maybe the person who is making the judgment is so ensconced in that judgment that our coming back and reframing it for them is going to piss them off. And they're going to say, well, you whatever, calling you names and stomping off. Not likely, but nonetheless, the point is that we can at least reframe it in our own mind. And if we choose to speak up and offer a different perspective, then all well and good. So, it's a practice, it's a personal practice, it's a spiritual practice where we are in the consciousness of looking at this situation in terms of what we can learn from it, how we can grow ourselves, and how we can help others review and reframe and gain a new perspective on that which they are judging. It's not about being evangelist. It's not about going out and pounding on people to try to make them see it your way, but rather it's to help them release the chains of judgment that bind them. When Jesus said, "Judge not, lest ye be judged," what he was speaking of was not some kind of moral superiority. He was not talking about a tit-for-tat kind of karmic law that comes into play, but rather he was saying that when you judge another, what you are doing is you are separating yourself from God. And when you separate yourself from God, you have condemned yourself to that separation for however long it takes for you to come to a change of mind. And when you come to that change of mind, you will then be able to look upon your experience with love rather than with this judgment. So, "Judge not, lest ye be judged" is all about describing the dynamics in consciousness of what happens when you separate yourself from another. When you separate yourself from another, you are also separating yourself from God. Remember the two great commandments. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. Those two great commandments are actually one commandment, right? Love God with all your heart, and in loving God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself, because you and your neighbor and God are one. When you love God, you will therefore love everyone, and when you love everyone, you will also love God, because that is the way it is. You can't separate one from another, hate one, love the other, because that separation is only possible in your imagination. In reality, it is not possible. Well, another video clip. Nope. That one. Yes, thank you.
In 2010, my doctor told me to buy a funeral plot because I would need one within the next 5 years. But I'm still here because a shelter dog saved my life. When people see a photo of who I was 5 years ago, they can't and often don't believe that it's me. My weight had crept up to 340 pounds. My blood pressure was through the roof, super high cholesterol. I had type 2 diabetes, and I was taking over $1,000 worth of medications a month. And I just felt really uncomfortable around other people. I became separated from society, and I just stopped living. I went on a business trip. You know how small airplane seats are? I could barely squeeze into one, and basically I'd spill over both sides. They had to delay the flight because they didn't have a seatbelt extension that would fit me. There was a gentleman next to me, and he just looked in complete disgust, and he looked at me and he goes, "I'm gonna miss my connection because you're too fat." That really was my bottom point. That's the point that I really decided that, you know, I'm either going to die or I have to do something. I looked in the phone book and I found a nutritionist near me. One of the first things that she asked me to do was to go adopt a shelter dog. It would force me to go outside. It would force me to become more socially interactive. So I went to the local shelter, and I remember telling the lady I would like an obese middle-aged dog so that I would have something in common with him. And when I walked into the room, we both looked at each other with like a look of, really? I took him home that night. Neither of us knew what to expect. And over a period of time, we really formed an inseparable bond and one that I'd never really experienced with another person or animal or anybody. We began walking for at least a half an hour a day, every day, and over the course of a year, just by changing what I ate and walking with Petey, I lost about 140 plus pounds. Everything about my life improved. I got off all meds. I no longer have type 2 diabetes. Petey also lost about 25 pounds, so we did it together. It was like a miracle.
There you go. Woo! Hi, Petey.
So I read over Petey's paperwork when I adopted him, and it turns out that he was left alone in a backyard, and nobody played with him. He'd had arthritis and all kinds of rashes, and his skin was just itching all the time. He was wondering what would ever happen to him. He'd gone from being in a situation like I was, where he didn't have any friends and he didn't know anybody, and really became a proud dog.
Petey ready for the next stop? Petey's a good boy.
Beyond unconditional love,
Yum, peanut butter.
Petey taught me absolute loyalty. He looked at me in every sense as though I was the greatest person on the planet. I decided that I wanted to be the person who he thought I was. One of the things that I dreamed of doing was running a full marathon, and he looked at me like, you can do it, and I went out and I did it. This entire process brought me out of my shell and made me a different person. I knew that he was getting old and his time was coming. They discovered a really large cancerous growth on his spleen, and there was really nothing that they could do. I knew that he was going to die. I just lay with him on the floor. He just looked at me, and I could tell that the life had just passed out of him, and that was the end. And I just sat there and I held him. I loved him so much. I just was so sad, and I'm still not over it. About 6 months later, after a race, suddenly just came into my mind, just drive over to the shelter right now, and I did. There was a dog that had been put in the adoption pen 4 minutes earlier. His photo wasn't on the wall, he wasn't on the website, and I just looked at him, and he looked at me, and he went, it was like, dude, let's get out of here. Jake is a completely different dog. Jake loves to play, and we started training, and he now runs 10-mile distances with me, and we're going to do our first half marathon together. He's the best running buddy I could possibly have. So really, thanks to Petey, I wake up every day wanting to be the best person that I can possibly be. He completely transformed me into a different person. I think about it now, who rescued whom? I mean, did I rescue him or did he rescue me?
So what's the relationship of these two video clips? What's the relationship of these two video clips? How do these relate to what I've talked about this morning? Pam? Expressing unconditional love. Okay. Pam? Nothing? Right? If we consider that our practice of judging is like obesity, what do we do? What do we do? We change our diet, we change our practice, we get engaged with love, And we allow ourselves to move into this new habit of being in love without judgment, taking our effort to a marathon. As I encountered that video this week and connected it with Orlando. Patrick, if you would.
Orlando, when you left the house this evening, I had a sinking feeling when I saw you drive away. Orlando, we've had our words, misunderstandings. Sometimes I can be demanding, and my words don't come out right. Now I'm scared, 'cause you won't pick up your phone. Sirens are blaring down the street. Some things inside of me tells me something's wrong. So I ran down to where they said you'd be. I can hear your phone ringing through those walls. I'm calling you, Orlando, answer me. Orlando, there are some things I should have told you, and some other things I should not have said. I'm regretting them right now. Orlando, you are loved, you are accepted. Well, I know you feel rejected, so I'm telling you right now that I'm so scared, 'cause you won't pick up your phone. Is this your blood here on the streets? Something in there went terribly wrong. So I'm standing here in front of where they said you'd be. I can hear your phone ringing through those walls. I'm calling you, Orlando, answer me. Orlando, my precious son, my daughter, I'd give anything to hold you again, but you've gone into the light, and I will do better to love your sisters and your brothers. We will love and honor each other, but I'm standing with them tonight. Well, this I promise you, your death is not in vain. I know your life will cause a change. 'Cause we can still hear you singing through these walls. We can feel you dancing through these walls. Orlando, Orlando.
Could we have the lights up? Could we have the lights up, please? And back to the PowerPoint. Matthew 4:14 through 16, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hidden. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Giving glory, allowing glory in all of your experience, allowing everything in your experience to be an expression of that radiance that you are. We'll have our meditation. As we breathe into this moment and allow this idea to settle in without self-condemnation, we recognize that, yes, that does happen from time to time. I do judge others. But I am the light of the world. I am the expression of God in this moment, if I choose to be. And I choose to be. And the awareness that that is my choice, that I can make, I come back into this time and space, sharing the words of the Lord's Prayer.